Wow. We've had some incredible interest for LGBTQ PopOn for 2021. And what is LGBTQ PopOn? It's all about kind of bringing together leaders in the world of advertising, marketing, social media, new media, and bringing them all together to kind of take a deep dive into topics that are really specific in this marketplace for us. And so, in the meantime, between now and the end of the year, we're going to be doing a variety of different introductory interviews. So you get a chance to know all the folks that are going to be with us next year, helping us better understand some of these topics that we'd love to have more info on. Here we go.
Sure. Thank you so much for putting this together and for sending me the invite to join you on today's meeting. As you mentioned, I work at the LGBT Community Center in New York City, where I'm currently located. And well, now I'm in Queens right now, working from home. But I'm a New York City resident. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and lived here till I was about 19 years old. And then went to college in Ohio, where I went to Oberlin. But I've always had an art and social justice background. That's pretty much where my work revolves around with regards to community engagement and getting communities to be involved through the arts to talk about particular issues. In high school, I studied a lot of visual and performing arts, and then went on to continue that in college, where I did a little bit more photography and theater work, but then realized that I did not like to be in front of the camera as much as I thought I would. But then that would bite me years later in COVID years, where now we're always in front of a camera every day, all the time. So, I lived in Spain for a year, where I worked a lot with a lot of youth organizations, LGBT youth organizations in Cordoba, Spain, and we basically worked to provide them with resources to either deal with coming out experiences or to tackle any of the other issues that they might have had, especially with substance abuse or neglect and things like that. And that really kind of drove me to do the kind of work that I'm doing right now, where I came back to New York in 2005 after college, and then continued to work with nonprofit arts organizations, nonprofit arts education organizations that provided resources for families, low-income families, to go and visit museums free of charge. This was way before New York City had their NYC ID program that also allowed this to happen. But it really worked with nonprofit organizations to kind of act as a bridge of resources, because I think that there was, especially when we talk about immigrant communities, which is what I then wound up working with a lot, there was a lack of information available on how to access these resources that were readily available to them, that were funded, and that were free for them to partake in. And so I started working at a Museo del Barrio, which is a museum located in East Harlem that focuses specifically on Puerto Rican and Latin American art. And that's where I really began to do a lot more of the community engagement work within the East Harlem community, to let them know about the resources and the programs that the museum at this time was offering. And I felt like I wanted to make a transition to work specifically with the LGBT community. And that's when 2 years ago, I moved from El Museo del Barrio to the community center where I'm at right now, where I'm the manager of arts and culture programming. So
Yeah.
since April, have been using new media, YouTube, online platforms to basically put together all of our arts and culture programming. We're close physically as a building. So for those of you that don't know about the center, we're located on 13th Street in Greenwich Village, where we've been there since 1983, housed in the building that's been around since the late 1800s. And we provide resources for youth programs, for TG&C community support programming, recovery programs, or so anything related to 12-step programs and all that. Um, and then we also provide arts and culture programming. So on that infamous March 13th date, when we were all sent home to work from home, we had a really short period of time to think about how we were going to engage with our communities, because we do offer services that for some people are a matter of life and death situation, right? And so we basically took those 2 weeks to move everything online, and have are fortunate to say that 90% of our programming has been able to transition to this online place. So
Yeah.
it's definitely been an experience, and we've also seen some increases in areas that we didn't anticipate, especially if we're navigating these online spaces. We're opening ourselves up to communities that are not just New York based. And so with arts and culture programming, it's definitely been important to think about the why we want to do these kinds of programs, as opposed to the how. We know the how, we can just transition everything online to a Zoom meeting, but really thinking about the intentions of why we want to connect with our communities. And as we see community or queer spaces closing as a result of COVID, it's definitely important to um, maintain some form of connection with our queer communities and our allies through, at least from my angle, arts and culture programming. So we've been able to do a lot of our programming through Zoom, YouTube Live, Instagram Live, and so I think my main reason for wanting to join and hear you all is to just hear and network a little bit about what we can do in these online spaces. I think some of us all have different skill sets and experiences, and I definitely have learned streaming, online editing, video editing as a result of my COVID experience. And, I don't think that this is something that's going to go away once we start going back to in-person events. And so how can we think of the best ways and best practices to utilize these forms of technology to be able to access communities in different ways, especially when we think about,
Mhm.
ableist culture, right? And people that might not physically be able to attend events, whether they're based in New York or not, so really utilizing these experiences as ways to learn best practices. And so that's why I'm here. And outside of that, I'm also a part of the Making Gay History podcast advisory board, which is spearheaded by Eric Marcus. And it's a podcast that basically looks at the untold stories of queer history in the form of a podcast. It was originally a book, and now it's on its fifth season as a podcast series. And also sit on the board of directors for a number of performing arts organizations here in New York City. So,
Yeah.
through those experiences, kind of um, seeing what other people are doing in different fields. So I'm happy to be here and to hear
Yeah.
all of your your people's amazing experiences. So thank you.